You've made it to Chirohustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. Before we dive into this powerful episode, please remember to subscribe to our channels and to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes and to continue hustling. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Community Healthcare Resources, Life Chiropractic College West. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 431 of the Chirohustle podcast. I am your producer, Luke Millette, and here's your host, James Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Mandi Counters. And if you want to hear about the neurological approach to migraines and strokes, stay tuned. Welcome back. This is another episode of the Chirohustle podcast. We have episode 430. Every one of these I feel like I've crossed another threshold of milestone because we're on our march to 1,000 episodes of this show. And I really believe that every episode really matters. And I believe that you're our first nurse practitioner interview. I interviewed an occupational therapist today for my first time also, which I love getting different perspectives on the medical model, chiropractic model, the healthcare industry from people that aren't just chiropractors. So I think it's going to be a really dynamic episode. But before we jump into this one, I want to let people know our big why. Why do we do what we do? And we do protect freedom of speech. I think that's so important, as we've seen over the past 3 years. There's been a lot of infiltration and removal of truth from what we do in the medical world. And we have to protect the sacred trust of knowledge, and that's a chiropractic thing. But if you guys don't know what that means, go and search for B.J. Palmer Sacred Trust. In the chiropractic profession and lexicon, we do support subluxation-based chiropractic, innate intelligence, and universal intelligence. And the reason I have to make a note of this all the time is because the actual chiropractic institutions and schools are moving this languaging from the schools. It's like erasing history. And that's the reason I bang the drum so much at the beginning of these episodes, to let people know about innate intelligence, universal intelligence, subluxation, and the sacred trust, because those things are philosophical standards for chiropractic. But today we have Mandi Counters here, who is a nurse practitioner for 20 plus years. And I'm excited to hear your take on what you're doing in the healthcare profession. And maybe you can share with us your story about how you got into becoming a nurse practitioner, and maybe a little bit of the idea of what's going on in your world today.
Absolutely. So first off, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you today. So very, very, very excited to be your first nurse practitioner. So how I got into healthcare, it's kind of started a bit cliche. When I was a little girl, I wanted to either be a nurse or a teacher. And over the last 23 years, I've had the opportunity to be both and more. And it's been so exciting to see all the changes in healthcare and be involved in them. So again, wanting to be a nurse or a teacher all the way through, had a lot of really good role models growing up. We had a really close family friend who was part of our church, she was a nurse, and she was a great leader in our church. And I looked up to her a lot. She unexpectedly passed away when I was in high school. And she was a big founding reason for why I even got into healthcare to begin with. Also during high school, one of my grandmothers passed away from multiple strokes and heart attacks. And that really kind of led the way for me getting into neurology eventually someday. But at that point, I didn't know what it was I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a music major at that point then too. Went to college and all the doors were closing. It just wasn't working. And then went back to my initial roots of getting into healthcare, and all the doors opened up. And it was just easy going from nursing assistant to nurse to manager to then ultimately nurse practitioner, where I am right now. And it was just one thing after another led me to where I needed to be. And we always say things happen for a reason, and it certainly did. I got into healthcare for a reason. And it was all my experience was always in neurology from the year 2000 on. And I can't imagine being anywhere else but in neurology, because that's just where my passion lies, where my heart beats for anything related to brains. So I sometimes joke that I'm a zombie because I love brains. But so that's kind of how I got into neurology. And then uh, everybody has a personal story generally. Normally, people either get into it for personal reasons or family or something. And I had the family that got me into it initially, the family friends and family and all of that. And then in 2019, I had my own health issues and got really sick with an autoimmune illness that took a long time to identify. And in the process of that, I got introduced to functional medicine, which we'll talk about more as we go through here today too. But with that first introduction to functional medicine, it really opened my eyes to a totally different way of working in healthcare. Rather than our traditional Western medicine where we put a Band-Aid on everything, it was more of what's the cause? Why are you having an issue? And I realized that I was kind of made for functional medicine as well, because I've always, in my neurological practice, strived to find the cause. Why are my patients sick? Rather than just giving them a prescription to deal with their symptoms. So it seemed like a natural fit just to get into the functional medicine world. And I started taking some courses to get certified, which I'm still working on. But in the process, I was looking for little side hustles and found a side hustle in functional medicine working with a chiropractor who I had really not had experience with chiropractors up to that point, except for the occasional complication that would come to the hospital where I was working. So that's the only experience I had. So when I had the opportunity to work with the chiropractor that I deal with now, working with our regenerative medicine practice, he opened my eyes to the world of functional medicine as through the lens of a chiropractor, and it's been so much fun working with him. He's now one of my best friends, and I've learned a lot from him. He's learned a lot from me as a practitioner, because both of us had our transgressions against the other, and it's been just a really eye-opening experience and a lot of fun to get to know his practice and see how his patients have benefited from him. And we've started working on regenerative medicine treatments together so that we can improve the lives of even more people.
Yeah, I think it's really important to collaborate.
Mhm.
And one of my mentors that first taught me how to podcast, his tagline was, "We're all more alike than we are different."
Mhm.
And I think that there's a lot to be said about that. And, when I was a little kid, if you pointed a finger at somebody, they say every time you point a finger at somebody, you got three pointing back at you.
Exactly.
And I think that, I would go out and do tons of marketing events for chiropractors.
Mhm.
And somebody would come by and boastfully say, "I see a physical therapist," or "My daughter's a physical therapist." And I'm like, cool. Well, we like them too. We can all have dinner at the same table. And I was like, people need different types of modalities at different parts of their life. I tell people it's no season, reason, lifetime for relationships, but I feel like that's the same analogy for like health, and like you said, you had an autoimmune thing that was going on. So season, reason, lifetime. Like,
Mhm.
do you want it for a season? Do you want it to find the reason? And do you want that for a lifetime? And I
Exactly.
think if we can come to terms with the simplistic ideas of we're all more alike than we are different as practitioners or with message tellers. And also, health is a season, a reason, or a lifetime.
Mhm.
And if we can take that simple thing and start making sense of it, like, what are we going to do? And off camera, I think I coined a new phrase. Like, you're into functional medicine. And I was like, well, is it funk med or is it dead med? And I think that when people are on the other type of the spectrum, they're actually slowly drip killing themselves with things that aren't intended to like make them healthy. They're intended to be consumers.
Mhm.
And, I think that we could talk a whole lot about that, but let's talk about functional medicine and how you see how that is impacting the people you get to take care of.
Yeah, after that my personal experience in it, I got really interested in looking more at what all opportunities are there. And all of a sudden, as I started looking things up, I realized that there were functional medicine practices, kind of little ones all over the place. It's just people aren't aware of it, and they don't understand what it is and what it can do for people. So I've been on a mission on my social media platforms trying to get people more involved in functional medicine and again trying to get certified with it myself. So functional medicine basically at its roots looks at the root cause of the problem. So it's a lot of questions being asked on what were things like leading up to the problem that you have right now, including all the way back to your infancy and even before. So what were some issues that might have happened during your mother's pregnancy with you that might have led to issues that you have now? But it's more of what's going on in your life that led to this problem rather than here, take a medicine, let's deal with the symptoms. And in my practice, working in the hospital, I don't get to do quite as much. So working with Eric on our little side hustle, and Robert is the other chiropractor that works with us as well for our regenerative medicine. We are doing more to try to improve people's underlying health rather than just, again, throwing medications at them, which is kind of the upset of chiropractic treatment anyway, is trying to treat things without medical treatment or medicines, but more natural approach. So we are taking that more natural approach. And with my neurological background, I'm also taking that a step farther. Through 20 years of taking care of patients, most of my patients have either been strokes or migraine with headaches. And now I'm branching out and creating my own little thing. And again, another side hustle. I love that hustle idea. But creating this online treatment way to deal with patients and help them manage their migraines and prevent migraines from happening by taking a step back and looking at why they're having them to begin with. What's going on in your life that's causing this, that we can adjust in your lifestyle rather than here, take another medication. So really just looking at the why. Why are you having the issue rather than what can we do to give you another side effect potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I see this as that's kind of where healthcare is going. It's the way of the future.
I think you like said something there, and I think it's become so popular for people to just use the phraseology of side effect.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten more integrated into the medical world, into the healthcare arena, I realize that they're not side effects, they're direct effects.
Mm-hmm.
And people are directly taking on another problem
Mm-hmm.
for something that's supposed to be a Band-Aid almost, to get them through like a wound scenario. Like people are wounded,
Yep.
and we're going into triage, and we're like, all right, you got a wound. We're going to stitch you up. We're going to put some bacteria, non-infection stuff on you, and you're going to get better. And it's going to heal up, and then we'll re-examine the scar, and we'll make sure the scar goes away.
Yep.
We don't do that for people that have like these like really entrenched illnesses. We say, okay, you got diabetes. We're going to send you test strips, and we're going to put you on 17 pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life. And we're not going to talk to you about eating right. We're not going to talk to you about drinking water. We're not going to talk to you about exercise. We're not going to talk to you about meditation. We're not going to even tell you about chiropractic. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a pharmacological approach to something that could be treated like a wound.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the approach of functional medicine. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So rather than, again, analogy, diabetes or blood pressure, whatever it is, typically we are giving patients prescription medications to try to treat that, which if you watch any of the advertisements on TV about any prescription medication, it comes with this laundry list of symptoms or things that could happen because of the medication. And sometimes it's like, do you really want to treat whatever it is you have with that medication to potentially have one of those symptoms afterwards?
Never.
And then sometimes you're on other medications to treat the symptoms that the other medication gave you. And whereas, exactly right, if you look at your exercise, if you look at your diet, there's so many things that get triggered in our lives just because of diet. I found that with my own autoimmune issues, trying to figure out what things I could and couldn't eat in my diet that would trigger any of my flare-ups. Mm. And it seems to be a simple thing, but it's not easy. So it's not easy for people to make lifestyle changes, but it would prevent so many side effects from happening with those pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, and I think that we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about like what you're doing to stay healthy, to keep yourself, tip-top shape, to be a great practitioner, but also to, not revisit the past of having these flare-ups like you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a thing called the Autoimmune Paleo Protocol, AIP, that I initially followed when I found out that I had an autoimmune disease. And in that process of following this autoimmune protocol, you remove anything in your diet that could potentially cause an inflammation process in your body. So anything inflammatory goes out the wayside for at least 30 days. And then you can slowly start to bring things back in and see what you can bring in, what you can't. If it brings back symptoms, it goes away. And I initially did that and found out that I couldn't do any gluten foods. I couldn't do a lot of dairy. For a while, I couldn't do any nightshade vegetables. And for people who don't know who that is, that's like peppers, onions, all the good things that you put in a fajita. Couldn't do it. And so by avoiding all of those things, I actually, nice side effect, lost 30 pounds in 6 months because my body was no longer inflamed all the time. I personally was having a lot of migraines. My migraines went away when I took away those foods. And yes, you can get tested for like a celiac type of thing, but you have to then bring back the things that cause the problems so that you can actually do the inflammatory test. So that wasn't an option. And through my functional med training or my functional med practice as a patient, I had a bunch of genetic testing done, which we found out which foods would be better for me based on my genetics, which foods I shouldn't do. Found out that I'm essentially a celiac and I didn't know it. So all my life I've been trying to do things healthier by switching to whole grain foods. That was actually worse for me than not having the whole grains in my diet. And since finding out all those things, I don't feed those to my kids either. So at home, I practice the things that I preach to my patients. So I eat healthy. We eat mostly organic, whole foods. We don't bring a lot of processed foods into our house. We drink a lot of water. That's the number one thing that we drink. We hardly ever have soda in the house just because it's not good for you. If we do, it's limited amounts. I laugh at my kids when we go trick-or-treating at Halloween because I still let them do that, but that candy lasts them well over a year. We throw out most of their Halloween candy next year when we go out trick-or-treating again, because they're just not big candy eaters. And starting them young like that, I'm hoping to prevent a lot of the health issues that can come later on from eating a lot of processed foods, eating all the candy, and things that cause health issues.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Community Healthcare Resources, Life Chiropractic College West. Let's hustle. Yes, so I think that's really good insight for people. Make the family healthy from, a perspective of it's okay, but let's not overdo it. Mm-hmm. And, I think that it's really important for people to know that there should be like a time for like a little bit of a celebration. It shouldn't always be like, nothing. It shouldn't ever be like, stop that. There should be always a little bit of like, let's not say no, but let's just use it in moderation. And I think that, sugar is quite addictive. And if we're not mindful of it, it can really take over a whole like dynamic of a family, because if there's like, peaks and valleys of like sugar usage, and mostly peaks, kids aren't sleeping well.
Right.
They're wound up and their behavior's not good.
Right.
There's a lot of direct effects from like a sugary diet that, really like decay the family like peace. And I think that people have to understand that it's not, do you want this or is this good for you? It's what is best for the family unit.
Right.
And having kids on sugar drug isn't the best thing for a family unit, because the kids aren't sleeping. If the kids are sleeping, the adults aren't sleeping.
Right.
And if the adults aren't sleeping, then the adults are cranky. And now we have this, problem with like,
spiral.
we have this whole temperament issue.
Yep.
So I think that understanding that, what you just said about, let's still go trick-or-treating. Let's still like, have a holiday, but let's not make that like the most important part of life is, this type of like, let's eat clean. How about that? And drink water. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that that's really good, because then it's making healthy families.
Yep.
And if we really want to keep the family unit healthy, we have to like be in moderation of sugar intake, which, talking to doctors every day, I don't know anybody's like, I want my kids to eat more sugar and candy.
Right. Yeah. That's not a thing.
And I was just at a chiropractic marketing event in Alaska, and this he's a native of Alaska, And he came up and he's like, so he was trying to like get some clarity. He's like, so if I come to the chiropractor once, will I have to come for the rest of my life? And I said, well, it's like going to the dentist. If you come to the dentist once, would you like to go for the rest of your life? I mean, I'm not saying that you want to go, but do you think it's necessary that you should go and get your teeth checked every 6 months to see if there's any decay or if you need to get them cleaned or anything like that? I go, they call that dental hygiene. Well, what we do here in chiropractic is we call it spinal hygiene.
Right.
You should get checked regularly to see if there's anything going on. And yeah, you should go to a chiropractor from now to the rest of your life. And that's an honor for you to be able to do that. It's not something that is like mandated or bad or negative, or we're pushing you into it. Like, it's something that you're going to do that's going to have a positive effect on your life and your nervous system and your mobility. And you're going to have less need for other pharmacological introduction and less drugs, like, you know, the whole thing. Like, you're just going to be a better, healthier person. And he's like, wow, I've never heard anybody explain it to me like that.
Yep. So, there's a role for all the things that we do in healthcare. So
let's talk hyper local. I think marketing is a part of healthcare. Obviously, you know that if we turn on a television, there's like 17 commercials about some type of drug intervention, like every 10 seconds. So local community, how are you making a positive impact? What are you doing? How are you doing outreach?
So a lot of what I do is on social media. Pretty much everything has moved towards social media these days. And I've am involved in a lot of different neighborhood Facebook groups and private groups where if there's an opportunity that I can share my insight and expertise, I do. And not only do I do that in my local community, but also in my larger community of healthcare. So I'm a go-to person for a lot of my former students, a lot of my former colleagues when they have questions. Because I've been doing this for 20 years in neurology, I have a lot of expertise. And because of my personal experience in autoimmune health, I've gotten a lot of questions regarding those kinds of things as well. So it's been a great way to get people in touch with other local providers, getting them in with functional medicine so that they have that connection. A lot of people don't know where to start, where to find a functional medicine practitioner. So just helping them get that connection local where we are so that they can get their foot in the door and start getting better health that way. Those are my biggest ways. And then working with the chiropractors that I do also with our local clinic with the regenerative medicine, just trying to get the word out about what we can do to better our health without pharmaceutical means as well.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. You know, I think that, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, people would have been blacklisted within the medical arena if they said anything to push back against, big pharma and, pharmacological introduction to consider it to be a healthcare. And I think now practitioners are a bit more strong and willing to weather the storm of, a less popular approach to make sure that they are following the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm.
Exactly.
And I think that it's really courageous to say I'm a functional medicine doctor and we're using regenerative medicine and I'm working with chiropractic. Like, I think that's a very courageous thing for somebody to be a nurse practitioner to say that I don't want to be a part of the demise of humanity through a pharmacological approach. I think it's really positive and it's a strong position because there is another way. I think it was Hippocrates that said, let food be thy medicine.
Right. There is still a place for pharmaceuticals. They have their place, but it's definitely not the forefront in healthcare.
And, I don't host my show to lambaste that.
Yeah.
I host my show to give truth to chiropractic.
Yep.
And, I think that people should make informed decisions on what they do for them and their family's health.
Absolutely.
And I can just talk from my lens of what I like. Yep. And I can interview people on what they think is right for them. Yep. I'm just skewed more to less is more.
And I tend to go that way as well. So we're good.
If I was pushed down a direction that somebody's like, hey, Jim, you're going to die tomorrow if you don't do something with this thing, I'd be like, all right, well, give me what I need because I don't want to die.
Right.
But I've also been told this, Mandy, that you should have two doctors in your life, one to keep you healthy and one to save you from dying.
Yeah.
And I like both. I like both
That's
options,
very true.
Just to be clear, if I like show up and they're like, hey, you need to go do this thing, I'm like, all right, I'll do that thing because I don't want to
Very good point. Yes.
die. Because I'm not a fool, but
Yeah.
I do know that we have to have both intervention and we have to have, long-term health, but we're responsible for our health too.
Absolutely. And that's the part where people forget is that it's a lot of people want to go in and they want to be fixed and they don't want to put in the hard work. And to truly live a healthy life, you have to put in the hard work. It's not an overnight quick fix. You can't just take a pill for that.
hmm We always like to say in chiropractic, there's not a pill, a potion, or a lotion that can have an influence the way that a chiropractic adjustment can have on the influence of the nervous system.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important. So, talking healthcare, talking sick care, talking where we're going, where do you see the healthcare profession headed 5, 10, 20 years down the line?
Yeah, I think we are in a time of major shift. Being in healthcare for 23 years, I've seen a lot of change. And I think COVID really brought out the necessity for different kinds of care. And I think that's opened a lot of doors for people doing online care, concierge care, treatment for you right now, rather than going into the hospital where it's a great chance you might get sick going there because there's a lot of germs in a hospital. It's not the great place to be to get well all the time. We wake people up. We're doing assessments all the time. So the hospital is not where you want to be. That should not be your primary place to get healthcare. The primary place should be in your home, local. What can you do to get the best care for you before you need a hospital and hopefully prevent that need?
hmm
Sure, job security for me working in the hospital, but that's not the way I want job security. I'd rather keep people well and do it that way. And that's where I'm even moving with my healthcare treat options as well, doing my online headache treatment, trying to move with the changes in healthcare, moving toward the next generation of healthcare, online, easy access to anybody, rather than having to run it through your insurance company and having your insurance company tell you, no, you can't do something. As a provider, that's very frustrating for me because I would love to be able to do for my patients as I need to do for them rather than what the insurance company wants me to do. And that's, I think a lot of the online options are going to be just that. They're going to solve that problem where people don't have to do that. They can find the healthcare that they need when they need it.
Yeah, I think that what you're talking about is so true. We've created a whole lot of more access points.
Mhm.
And I think just to drive a point home that you talked about was, going to the hospital for healthcare. I think that in triage situations, perfect.
Mhm.
But if a lifestyle condition has sent you to the hospital, generally speaking, that's where people go to die. And unfortunately, that's the sour truth of the hospital model. Is that's people's last resorts because they didn't do anything for their health up until that point, and then they're like, "I want you to save my life."
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And then they come into the hospital and like, well, you've waited 45, 55 years before you've actually done something. You don't drink water.
Mhm.
You drink, you smoke,
Mhm.
you eat sugar. You don't have a good, healthy diet. When's the last time you ate a fruit or a vegetable? And then they're like, save my life though. And you're like, well, in chiropractic philosophy, we say that there's limitations of matter.
There are.
And that if you
Absolutely.
come in with poor matter, there's a limit to what medical intervention can do,
Yep.
and your quality of life might not ever be the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit more about you. I know we've gone down a lot of rabbit trails talking about the hospital industry, about medical freedom, medical health, informed decisions, and things of that nature. But who have been some of your influences? Who's really helped you to become the nurse practitioner that you are today?
A lot of it started when I was a kid, looking up to my sisters. I'm the youngest of five girls, so they were my first role models, looking up to see what they did. And then, as I mentioned, our family friend in church, who was the nurse that really kind of got me interested in nursing to begin with. Uh, both of my grandmothers had health issues toward the end, and I think the biggest thing with my mom's mom, she was not. Uh, I was at the end of my high school. Had a child, and I had all sorts of open time, kind of, but I wasn't there for my grandma, and I always kind of felt that I needed to be there for other people's grandparents when they didn't have family there, because I wasn't there for my family. And I really regretted that in the end. So I've always gone into every patient care situation of being that person that's there for them. That became really important during COVID when we couldn't have family members in the hospital. Just being that hand to hold, whether it be a gloved hand or whatever, but I was there for people when nobody else could be there for them. And in all honesty, my patients have been true heroes to me as they fight through things that nobody would ever want to have to fight through, whether it be cancer or massive strokes. And we can't always prevent the strokes. So that's always been the hardest thing for me, is even when somebody does something absolutely right, they can still end up with that. And just watching them fight through those things was always a huge battle for me. I'm still really close friends with some of my former patients who have really worked very hard to be really happy in their lives. And you can be well with an illness as long as you figure out how to be the most productive you can in your life and do the healthy things even after something went wrong. So my patients have been a big impact on me. That's why I continue to do what I do, is because of the wonderful patients that I've had time and time again. And yeah, that's what keeps going.
No, that's beautiful. I think that might be one of the most profound things during the interview is your big why,
Mm-hmm.
because these people need somebody that can be a compassionate caregiver, and you're qualified, your heart's in it, and yeah, you were influenced at a young age to find something that mattered to you,
Mm-hmm.
and you fought really hard to find your position in the world, and you're out there doing your best, and you want people to be able to have good access to care, which I think is a lot of integrity. And I think that when I talk to so many health professionals, that they all do it because they want to help more people. And I don't think anybody ever got into the healthcare model because they wanted to see people more sick.
No.
And I'm sure it's really confusing to most people that are at the top of their game when they see people less healthy, and they see longevity of life starting to reduce, and they see like the numbers showing that we're spending the most in healthcare, but we're 36th on the list of healthiest nations.
Mm-hmm.
And kids are expected to live less time now than they're the last generation. And I think that that's a real trouble as we start to move forward. So we have to have more compassion, but we also have to have more responsibility.
Absolutely.
And that's what I think functional medicine is doing.
Absolutely.
And I think that we're bringing more responsibility to the healthcare environment,
Mm-hmm.
where people actually are getting the outcome that they're looking for, rather than creating long-term customers of a system that we want to improve upon.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So at this juncture, I'm really curious. I know that we like to end our interviews with miracle stories,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kind of just like tongue in cheek with you off camera, but 20 years into the medical arena, I'm sure you've experienced something that you like to share with our audience, maybe a story of hope and healing that you've seen happen with what you've been a part of.
Yep. Yeah. I have a lot of really good at examples of different miracle things that have happened, some with actually pharmaceuticals, but working in stroke for so long, things have evolved so much in healthcare that it's no longer, where should I start with this? When I started this 23 years ago, if patients had a stroke, they came to the hospital, they got therapy, we hoped and wished for the best. And there really wasn't much that we could do for them. Over that time frame, we've come up with things that can actually stop a stroke from happening. And I've had multiple opportunities to be involved in giving that clot busting medication, where somebody comes in, they come in really quickly, we identify the symptoms, and we give them the clot busting medication, and it breaks up the clot that's causing their stroke, and they get back to being their absolute normal self. And every time that has happened, that's been a miracle in itself. The fact that we've been given the knowledge to create these things that can actually stop a life-altering event from happening, and then have the opportunity to then sit down with that patient and say, okay, now what can we do to prevent this from happening again? And that's, again, where my why comes in. Why did you have this happen? What can we do? What can we change in your life so that you don't have this happen again? And time after time, people have that kind of aha moment that, oh yeah, what I've been doing is not healthy. And that's where I need to change things. And it's the people that get back to 100% normal that they realize that they have a second opportunity. They've been given a second chance that they can change things, they can do things better. And I used to do clinic in addition to hospital, and I loved following up with those patients afterwards. And they would come back and they would actually change things, and they would actually listen to the advice that I gave them about sleeping more, reducing the processed foods in their diet, changing their stress levels, even because sometimes stress is the thing that throws people over the edge, and just changing those lifestyle things that, again, are simple but not easy, but then makes their lives so much more valuable, and they get so much more joy out of their life because they've made the changes they needed to prevent that kind of devastating thing from happening again. And that's time after time, just the biggest miracle, the fact that we can actually have an impact on patients if they then realize that they also have a lot of power in this, and they have more power than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many times I've told patients that, I can only do so much for you at this point. You have to take over, and you have to take it the rest of the way, because I can't do this for you. You need to do this. And it's like, oh, yep.
Yeah, you have to be an active participant in your recovery.
Yep, absolutely.
And, doctors, they exist for a purpose, to be educated and to facilitate care. But at the end of the day, I've always been told the number one doctor is the one inside of us. And I think that that's a great takeaway for everybody, is to know that they have to be an active participant in their health and their recovery. And I think that, as we develop with functional medicine and nurse practitioners working hand in hand with chiropractors, and, we also mix in the pharmacological approaches to health and healing, that there are times in our life where we do need to have intervention at a high level, and we need to do our best to reverse the symptomatology that somebody's experiencing, to give them a better chance at existing longer, which I think that that's a real responsible thing to do. And I think that this has been a really amazing opportunity to share almost opposing viewpoints, but they intersect well. And I think that it's important for people to hear the conversation around the medical model, the chiropractic lifestyle, and what we can do to make a better future for people that need better access points, and to know that, the insurance companies aren't really concerned about people's health. They're concerned about, how much money do they make off of, the industry. And I think that it takes a whole lot of responsible people with a bigger mission to turn the ship from disaster.
Absolutely.
And I think that we have enough people that want to see a better future for their kids. And I think that we have enough people that have integrity and grit and desire and hustle, that want to see a better future for the families. I know you want to probably see a better future for your children's children.
Absolutely.
And if we don't all work together with a unified message, then it's just people that are opposing viewpoints that can't have dinner together. And I think that there's still a lot of room for us to make friends with other healthcare providers, and to offer solutions for everyone. So
absolutely.
I really appreciate you being episode 430 with us today. It's been really insightful for me. It's been, I'm sure, an eye-opener to a lot of our audience today, to see how a nurse practitioner and a chiropractic advocate can come together and reason on the matter of better quality of health outcomes.
Yep.
Because that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
And I want you to have an amazing day, rest of your evening up there in Plymouth, Minnesota. And I'll sign off here today from Sequoia National Park. And I just want to thank you once again for being episode 430. And I'm going to close out by telling everybody, you guys are just one story away. Keep hustling. And Mandi Counters, thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you so much, James.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Talk soon.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.